ideology getting jammed, you get poetry slam. Hello, poets and poetettes. I'm back after moving my channel over to this new social media platform that I'm still trying to sink my feet into. And to start that transition is a new episode on my slightly revised Poetry Slam series. So this poem could be summarized in one phrase: ironic. And why? Well, the title of it should already give it away, but the fact that this guy is going to make the analogy of black people to gorillas and hit home in order to claim that people treat black people like animals is perhaps the most regressive shit imaginable, that some people will eat it up because it's on the left and not on the right. So get prepared to hear the word irony in this poem, because I don't think this guy can handle it. If you're not familiar with this series, I will go through the poem in classic response format and then rate it on 4 key standards: context/message, structure/verses, transparency, and rhythm, which will all result in the overall score of the poem. And of course, since most of these poem slams are used as a podium to whine incessantly, the Trollometer will present itself as a bonus to see how self-involved these people think they are and what they are saying. Again, don't expect any of these poems to fall above a 5 on average, because this is me slamming poems, not me hamming poems. Now, let's start the irony train, Marshall.
The black boy cranes his neck up at the gorilla, sees a glint of the familiar in the face watching him.
See, I already told you this fucking poem is ironic. This guy is already trying to make the distinction of the black boy and gorilla of being alike. He does realize that in certain contexts, gorilla was a racist connotation against black people, no? Maybe that's the point?
Feels the fear leave him peaceful as blood pooling on a city sidewalk.
Well, hey, if that's your version of peaceful, Jeffrey Dahmer.
And he whispers, I have so many questions.
I have several questions.
The gorilla straightens its back. Then ask me.
Wait, is the black boy Mowgli from the Jungle Book?
So the black boy asks, how do you survive your cage? And the gorilla shakes its head and responds, no one ever survives.
Well, I figured that the actual answer would be shit in the corner, get your food, mosey on by without getting violent, and you're good. Maybe he's making the illusion that the gorilla is already dead inside, but remember this little quibble that Marshall says, as he will repeat it in different variants.
And the black boy says, you're missing the point. Not at all, says the gorilla.
Looks like the gorilla took vote notes on how to say everything and nothing, or how to answer a question with another question from our lovely politicians, both left and right.
The black boy thinks for a moment, and the gorilla sees the panicked onlookers gathering around the fence, pointing, shaking like the barrel of an unsure gun.
Wait a second, is this supposed to be an allusion to the Harambe meme? Did you realize that the only people who turned that into a race-based thing were the leftists, right? The people who memed Harambe into race-based shit, like this gem you see before you, were making light of those people who have to make everything about race. Also, while I do think the parent was irresponsible for endangering their child like that, the gorilla did throw him around the enclosure ruthlessly. But sure, the gorilla didn't do nothing, just like the black people in Ferguson didn't do nothing to those privately owned businesses. They were just redecorating the glass windows and borrowing the appliances.
And the black boy says, but how do you stay alive? Where do you hide your anger?
Where in the world is the white gorillas at?
And the gorilla says, I never hide. And again, the black boy says, you're missing the point.
No, I think the gorilla answered him straight this time. Also, just as another note, the boy who fell into the enclosure was black, so if you're making the illusion the gorillas being black people, that means it was just another incident of black-on-black crime.
Not at all, says the gorilla. The black boy notices the commotion outside the gates and says, they're coming to protect me, you know. These hunters have been waiting. The gorilla scoffs. Silly human who believes in protection.
Silly darky, lynches are for blacks.
These hunters and their bullets never wait. They may make trophies of us, but we are not yet. We are still alive.
Remember that when the gorilla says us, he's also including the black boy in this, presumably the one that he's tossing around if the gorilla is indeed Harambe. And remember too, that Marshall is still attempting to make the illusion of gorillas as analogous to black people, but hey, I'm the racist apparently because I'm white. Also, the previous line of silly human who believes in protection falls apart if the gorilla sees the boy as his equal.
And the black boy says, but how? How are you still alive? How do you survive your cage? And
more unanswered questions later at 5.
the gorilla says, this cage is not mine.
See the animal in his cage.
And then the black boy says you're missing the point.
What is the fucking point exactly? Black people are gorillas. Harambe means be racist, yo. Marshall doesn't understand a single trace of irony with this poem.
Not at all, says the gorilla.
It is our duty to fight for our freedom. It is our duty to win. We must love each other and support each other. We have nothing to lose but our cage.
I didn't choose this cage, I was placed. These people with their wide white faces come to see us dangerous.
Stereotypes exist for a reason if we must make the analogy that gorillas are indeed black people, although you are the one purporting that, not I. The stereotypes of black people loving fried chicken, watermelon, and being criminals didn't just come out of thin air, nor the stereotype of white people loving mayonnaise, can't dance, or being racist didn't come out of thin air. So if people do see gorillas as dangerous, as they should since gorillas are typically trying to outclass one another in their own den, there's my allusion to gorillas and black people in hip-hop, then it is the only fault of the gorillas acting as they are, not the people who are pointing it out.
To watch our hands ready to tear living flesh from a skeleton, we pound our chests and roar as though we are not born of captivity.
So yes, the people have every right to see gorillas as potentially dangerous, which comes as no surprise that Harambe would throw that child around. Whether Marshall is going to try to say that it comes from their nature or due to the captivity, who knows? But how exactly is this in any way indicative of what black people go through? Are they secretly in captivity their whole lives? Are you going to set in motion internalized racism?
As though we are not stolen children, as though we do not live at their discretion.
Well, black people aren't some kind of vaudeville sideshow for people to gawk at because they are human beings too. Again, you are aware that naturally gorillas are prone to this kind of behavior. They don't have the kind of mental capacity or linguistics like human beings to act differently from one another, no?
They mistake our wailing for anger, but it is pain. The sound of the hell growing too big to be restrained. It is...
Well, here's an easy way to indicate anger. Are they acting out on emotion? Because you can, in fact, be angry over being in pain. Are you trying to insist that the black people who damage property in the name of getting their point across is going to sympathize to anyone their actions? I certainly don't. Especially with the way that BLM attempts to walk in on every event like as if it's already theirs. They may feel as though they are being victimized or abused, but the moment they think that violence is the answer is the moment they have lost all sympathy from me.
The sound of our demands. They imagine us without chain but never open the gates.
Oh yeah, because the sound of roar can really elicit a specific demand, right? Or that you get enough people demanding the same thing that appeal to popularity now suddenly works. Again, their actions and their attitude towards other people are what are going to make people scoff at them as being attention-seeking. It's exactly why Trump won the election, because the liberal elite and the Democratic establishment were way too comfy on their pedestal to just casually denounce white people as racist and men as sexist that they didn't realize that their pedestal was falling beneath them the whole way. It didn't matter what Trump said or what he proposed was stupid or poorly thought out. He was reaching his hand out for those who felt disenfranchised and attempted to unify America through common ground. He didn't even have to be convincing in his bullshit. He just said what the common people had to hear, and that was enough to seek his victory as the left, to this day, still blame everyone else but themselves for their downfall.
Never want us within arm's length of their fragile necks. Oh.
Well, seeing that gorillas walk on their hands, yeah, I don't want them to pop my head off like a fucking cork with that maw of theirs. But once again, I don't feel compelled to stiffen up whenever I see a black person come my way. It all depends on the context of the situation. If I walk up in a Detroit slum and a bunch of thugs are ganging up on me, them being black has nothing to do with why I feel uncomfortable, because I could just as easily feel comfortable if I walked into a blue-collar office cubicle with a bunch of black people working or eating. It depends on where I am and what the situation implies.
Only turn our turmoil to spectacle. They call us animals.
Only ones who turned Harambe throwing a kid around a spectacle was the leftist media who tried to attribute the killing of Harambe to white-on-black violence and oppression, because nothing is more ironic than using a racist connotation to call other people racist. You know your part, Marshall. You're playing your own role in engaging in the spectacle of the meme. Don't try to fall away in the backstage like you weren't the one hoisting the prop of racism along with the others, while most saw the situation as unfortunate for both parties involved.
Do not mistake the cage for yours. It was designed to contain you.
Keep in mind that Marshall has yet to go without ending this paragraph of a sentence on a period, which is why he's so out of breath for the script that he's clearly reading off the corner of the screen, as he has yet to look directly at the person watching it. At least he doesn't have a crowd to incite him into being more out of breath, but I guess. Also, thanks, Captain Obvious.
To hold you in place for observation.
Okay, Marshall, is there a cage in the enclosure? Is the enclosure the cage? I keep thinking in my head this cage that literally is redundant in this enclosure that has the gorillas play around in some structures and bathe in the pool, like that little boy who took a dive in himself.
You want to know how I survive? Boy child, you're missing the point.
Ah, that old chestnut. I know you are, but what am I, shtick? Maybe you survived because there wasn't a human onlooker who fell down your enclosure as a new plaything, perhaps?
No one ever survives. You should know this.
This gorilla is such a fucking edgelord. No one ever survives, cause we're dead inside. Black as the cold bars of this cage or enclosure or whatever holds us down.
You are black, like me.
Okay, Marshall, the fact that most gorillas are black has nothing to do with why people fear them. It is their attitude, their physique, and their behavior around other gorillas. This would be just as ridiculous as an Asian person trying to make the claim that the only reason that people fear lions is that they are yellow in color, and then taking an animal shooting like Cecil the Lion as the example of white people being afraid of Asians. Also, look at what you've done, you damn shooters. Now Cecil and Harambe are fighting.
You were born almost dead.
Come on, that gorilla doesn't know anything about what the boy experienced through. He probably got a rich, pampered life and was told that everything is racist, sort of like Jonathan Butler of the Mizzou protests fame.
And have been molting pieces of your alive since.
Wasn't that just a bunch of made-up horseshit? Molting pieces of your alive sense. Maybe you should have just said pieces of your mortality, you fucking ape. Oops, sorry. You prefer animal of color.
And the black boy says, then where do we go?
To fabulous Las Vegas!
How do we stop the pain?
Antidepressants, ibuprofen, Vicodin, heroin, Oxycontin, morphine.
And the gorilla says, I have only learned one way.
Furiously masturbate with your 2-inch cock in a nearby bush for everyone to watch?
Outside the cage, the hunter loads his rifle, swings the barrel up slow as nightfall.
Be polite. Be efficient. Have a plan to kill everyone you meet, including gorillas, apparently.
He can see every part of the gorilla through the sight, its chest, its throat, its temple.
So, KYS then, I guess. Or just protest violently until you get yourself killed, so you see yourself as a martyr to the others. Yeah, that'll get your point across, I'm sure.
The hunter relaxes, takes a deep breath.
So the hands up, don't shoot approach! You do remember that it's a hunter killing a gorilla in the name of protecting a human child, right? It's not a cop asking someone to put their hands up on someone who may or may not committed a crime. Are you sure you got the analogy home? I'm not sure you understand the poetic irony of attributing black people as gorillas in the name of trying to get black people to not be seen as gorillas, but unfortunately you won't, and unlike most of these other poems, I can't really muster the strength to get angry at you for it. And that was Marshall Gillson's Black Man Compares Black People to Gorillas to Stop Black People Being Compared to Gorillas. Or that would have been the title if Marshall had any shred of self-awareness. Ironic, doubly so, and tries to make stabs at the Harambe meme while failing miserably to understand why the meme was funny to begin with. But like him, that meme is dead too. So let's rate it as we always do. For message/context, I give it a 3. Merely that for it being ironic in its message of attempting to tackle race issues by, you guessed it, being racist. But who knows, maybe talking about race all the time is the only way to stop racism. As well as misinterpreting the popularity of the Harambe meme at the time also makes this poem lose points. But not to the point that it's an absolute 0, considering that at least there is a theme and setting involved. For structure/verses, I give it a 4. Sure, while Marshall isn't on the spit through your teeth approach to accentuating your speech, there really isn't that much form or cohesion with this poem other than the how do you do this questions followed by deflect question from the gorilla's perspective. Even with this poet not having an audience behind him, as it being a video challenge of sorts, Marshall still fails into the usual catch-all flourish of most poems around the end, where it's nothing but a diatribe of horrible metaphors and self-righteous flinging. For transparency, I definitely rate it at the lowest at a 1. As I've said before, the irony of a black person trying to stop people seeing black people as gorillas by comparing black people to gorillas is absolutely palpable and brings more to the saying, you don't speak for your entire demographic. And somehow, I don't even really believe that Marshall believes the shit he is saying, unless he got the completely funneled version of events when in regards to Harambe. But it should be known now that only the left made it a race-based issue. And for Rhythm, I'll give it a 5. With no audience to cheer him into destroying the fundamentals of poetry, his delivery is mostly on point for certain phrases and sentences, even if he is clearly reading off a script on the corner, as he also gyrates his hand movements on the far left area. Still, there isn't a clear measure or form to any of the delivery, so it's an impassioned speech with no direction at the end of it. Which puts the final score to a 4.25, roughly on the same boat with Imani Cezanne and Franny Choi, but still not being able to hit the mark over the 5 and don't expect it to. The shrill meter will cast Marshall at a 1, which will make him the equivalent of this frequent feminist saying,
paradoxically and somewhat ironically, those who most strongly believe that media is just harmless entertainment are also the ones most likely to uncritically internalize harmful media messages. In short, the more you think you cannot be affected, the more likely you are to be affected.
And tune in for another episode on this new media platform.